It's really nice to be here. Nice to see all of you. And I heard Admiral Herring give you kind of a worldview, a really, really interesting presentation. And so I'm from North Dakota, northern Great Plains. You know, we all come from the same place. Garrison Keillor said, up in the northern Great Plains, we were raised by people who taught us that life is an enormous struggle. And if at some moment you should feel very, very happy, be patient, it's going to pass. He also said, sex is good, but not as good as fresh sweet corn. Well, enough about Garrison Keillor. I'm from a town like yours, perhaps, 300 people. High school senior class of 9, top 5. I found my way through that little high school to serving in the state capitol as an elected official, then to the U.S. House, and then to the U.S. Senate. And I was proud in the United States Senate to be one of 3 people that offered the first renewable fuel standard in 2005, because I believe that we need diversity of fuels in this country. I believe our country is stronger, our national security and our energy security is made stronger by a diversity of fuels. Now, it doesn't matter to me whether oil was $10 or $20 a barrel or $110 or $20 a barrel. You still need diversity of fuels in order to protect this country. Now, let me mention to you that today, if Saudi Arabia decided that they wanted to move oil to $20 a barrel, they have the capability of doing that. They have those reserves, they have that production capability. They can do that with the snap of your finger. If, however, they decided that they want the price of oil to be $120 a barrel today, they can do that as well. Now, if you or your neighbors or anyone else is comfortable riding that Saudi Arabia roller coaster for the rest of our lives, then good for you. But I know you aren't. I know you believe that we need diversity of fuel, and we ought to continue this road that we started of producing biofuels, ethanol, biodiesel, and yes, second generation and cellulosic in the future, which is made in America fuel that makes us stronger. I mean, that's just a fact. So in North Dakota today, it's now Tuesday, I think, right? And North Dakota will produce 1.1 million barrels of oil today. And you know what? I'm somebody who really believes in let's do it all. I support it all. I support the transformational capability of producing oil and gas from shale. That's a good thing for our country. But that doesn't have anything to do with someone who suggests that because we're doing that, we don't need renewable fuels. Here's the circumstance. We face challenges these days because we've been successful. Interestingly, when we decided to have a renewable fuel standard and mandate, God forbid there should be a mandate, right? I'm all in favor of mandates for the right thing. And I'm all in favor of picking winners and losers, especially winners. So when they say to me, stop picking, I say, I'm interested in America picking winners for its future. But we decided to embark on this course together, deciding to create a diversity of fuel sources, and we were going to produce made in America fuels. And you know what? In a very short period of time, we were producing 10, 12, 14 billion gallons of ethanol. What an unbelievable success. And now we've got some folks that say, well, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't continue that. I don't know, God forbid. You know, I mean, the oil industry doesn't like it very much. That's those same old people that put us in the position in the first place. You know, they have always really felt deep in their bones that real energy policy and real men dig and drill. And if you're not digging and drilling, stop bothering us. You know, if you're one of these folks that drinks Chardonnay, drives a Volvo, has a corduroy jacket, and teaches philosophy at the local university, and preaches the wonders of wind energy and biofuels and so on, God bless you, but, you know, just stay out of our way so you don't waste our time while we're doing important things. You know those people? You know them, don't you? I run into them all the time. In fact, I made an impassioned pitch to one of them recently, and said, look, here is why that I was so interested in having a renewable fuels mandate, and here's why it's been successful. You know what the person said to me? I don't understand that. I don't understand that. I don't agree with you. I don't understand that at all. So I said, Clement Freud had a grandson whose name was, Sigmund Freud had a grandson named Clement Freud. And here's something Clement Freud said, which applies to you, I told him. When you hit someone over the head with a book and get a hollow sound, it doesn't mean the book is empty. I don't think I actually persuaded him. Some long while ago, I was sitting on an airplane that was the old Air Force One, the one that was retired under George H.W. Bush before the big 747 came in. And we were traveling across the Pacific Ocean late at night. Senator Daschle, myself, Senator Leahy, and Senator John Glenn. And in that little cabin on the old Air Force One, I leaned forward that night, and I was asking John Glenn about his space flight in 1963. And I said, John, you know, I was a boy then. I heard it on the radio, and then I read later that the city of Perth, Australia, decided that night, as the American astronaut flying alone above the Earth in orbit was going to come across on the dark side of the planet, everyone from Perth, Australia was going to turn on every light in Perth, Australia to signal that astronaut up there alone. I said, John, when you circled the globe that night and you went to the dark side and you were over Perth, Australia, did you see that light? And he said, I really did, because I was told they were going to do it. I looked down, I saw this brilliant little light in Australia, Perth, the city of Perth. And then he said something interesting. He said, on the dark side, when you're traveling above this earth, the only evidence of human life is the use of energy. It is the only evidence that humans live on this planet, if you look at it from way in the heavens down to a dark earth. And so the question of this issue of how humans use energy, what kind of energy do we use, how do we use it, how does it impact this planet, is a very important issue. And so we struggle with this. And now we're going through a couple things that are really interesting, and it's trying to juggle several things at once, and it's hard sometimes to kind of get your arms around it. I guarantee you there's one in this room, not me and not you, who in 2005, when we produced about 5 million barrels of oil a day, maybe 4.8 million barrels of oil a day, if you would have predicted, well, you know what? We're going to be producing 9 million barrels a day very soon. No one would have predicted that. Nobody believed that. We had gone from 9 to 10 million barrels a day in this country down to 4.5 or so. Hubbard's peak oil, we've reached it, right? Nobody would have predicted that. I guarantee you this. Last June, when oil was $117 a barrel, nobody in this room, unless you are now unbelievably wealthy, would have predicted that the price of oil today would be $45. So these things happen very quickly, and they are disruptive. Disruptive in terms of our decision making. What is the impact of the highly improbable, they call it? The impact of the highly improbable. Now, what Admiral Herring said to you about population is very interesting. Today, it's Tuesday, and there will be about 270 million new babies born on the planet. 270,000. 270,000 new babies on the planet on Tuesday. And about 110,000 people will die today. A morbid thought. But you do the math. You're going to add about 160,000 new people to this planet today. Do the math. It equals about 1 Dallas, Texas a week. Scary thought, at least for North Dakotans. That group of people, 70 million or so people in a year, they want to drive cars when they're able to drive cars. They want to use cook stoves. They want to have air conditioning. They want to have refrigerators. All the product of energy. And so the question is, what kind of energy and from where? Now, it is unfortunate that this country doesn't celebrate success, but we don't. If you were to celebrate success, we would have an unbelievable celebration for what we have done on renewable fuels. We took off when this government says we want you to do that, and our government said it, by the way, not just with our mandate, but our government said we're with you, we're behind you, we support you, you can count on us, invest in it, believe in it. We did all that. And by the way, Barack Obama's a friend of mine. I served with him in the Senate. I was with him in 2007 when he played a significant role, saying, I fully support all this. So we told everybody, believe in this because this is where we're going. This is America's future. And guess what happened? Well, we did it. And yet, no one has celebrated this success. We went from almost nothing to 14 million gallons of ethanol in a very short period of time. Billion, right, I should say. In a very short period of time. Same with biodiesel. And if you talk about wanting to reduce carbon, and we're going to have a lower carbon future, it seems to me maybe we ought to be celebrating all of this. Now, I'm disappointed, frankly, with the White House and the administration. I just am. This is not rocket science. This is not, nor is it some disease, mysterious disease for which we don't know a cure. This is not difficult for the administration to have done. The law says you establish a renewable fuel standard and then we build to that. And yet they dither. They can't seem to get it out. We're waiting for 2014 and then 15 and 16 and none of them are yet out. And no one knows when they'll be out. I don't understand that. This president has said he supports biofuels and he supports ethanol and biodiesel. We could and should expect better. So what do? Well, in my little town, we had a blacksmith. And anybody here, by the way, from a town of under 2,000 people? Yeah. Garrison Keillor also had a contest, by the way, called Top Talent from Towns Under 2,000. You raised your hand. And in fact, the winner, Garrison Keillor asked me if I would present the award at the Kennedy Center one night on the Millennium Stage when he wasn't going to be able to be there. And the winner happened to be a young woman from Iowa who played the fiddle, about an 18-year-old young girl from Iowa. But anyway, there's a lot of talent in these towns across the northern Great Plains and elsewhere where people from small towns who had big ideas decided we're going to build a plant because America says we should. And America thinks it's in the country's interest to do so. And so we did, and now all of us are pretty frustrated. We got a new group in Congress who they don't like any mandate, and they don't really like any incentives of any type, although they never mention the oil. And I always remind them, in 1916, our country said something to the American people. Our country said, look, we want you to go look for oil and gas. That's in the national interest. You go look for it, and God bless you if you find it. But you go look for oil and gas, and we will give you very sophisticated and very generous tax incentives to do so. It's in the country's interest. I didn't have any trouble with that, although I wasn't there in 1916. But those incentives have lasted 98 years and still there. And now they get all wrapped in a bundle because you have some incentives for renewable fuels and for wind energy and so on. What are they thinking? I mean, what's fair is fair. And this country has decided to embark on a course that will make America stronger with greater energy security and greater national security. And we ought not back away from that. I say it's important for us to start being a bit more noisy about what has happened. It's not fair for the government to supposed to give you an RFS and then you don't hear a word. I wonder, and I'll bet you do as well, what kind of a business strategy exists when the lenders or the investors or someone who's running a plant can't determine what might or might not be the future, what might or might not be the course with respect to these issues. I had a woman who runs a plant who told me about having to lay off all of her workers and how awful that was. And so, you know, this country has to do better on these issues, on renewable fuels. We all believe it will strengthen this country. Everybody in this room is here because we think this is part of America's promise. And yes, let's produce oil. Yes, let's produce natural gas. But yes, let's have diversity of fuels by promoting, encouraging, and assisting the development of a vibrant, growing renewable fuels industry. I'm not interested in stopping. I'm not interested in stopping. I'm interested in expanding. I sat in all these meetings where we were trying to go to E15. And guess what? The oil industry pushed and pushed and pushed back because they didn't want it to happen. And now they claim there's a blend wall. Well, hell yes, there's a blend wall. They helped create it. They're the ones that helped create the blend wall. So this country needs to expect better. Now, I want to finish with another message. I want to tell you a story. Because the question is, all right, what shall we do now? What must we do? And obviously, we've got to get tougher. And we've got to get louder. And we've got to get more persuasive for an industry that you've built. And an industry that we ought to be proud of. And an industry this country ought to celebrate. I mean, you know, look, this is an amazing place, right? I mean, we've invented the silicon chip, plastics, radar. We invented the telephone, the television, the internet. We cure smallpox. We cure polio. We build rockets and we build airplanes and learn to fly them, build rockets and go to the moon. And we're the ones that plant American flags on the surface of the moon. And we're driving a dune buggy the size of an SUV on the surface of Mars as I speak today. And we can't figure out how the hell to do this. And that makes no sense to me. So let me tell you a story. I had a call from a high school in North Dakota named Bowbells, North Dakota, 300 people. Town was 300 people. And their little high school called when I was in the Senate and said, would you be willing to nominate our high school marching band for the Memorial Day parade in Washington, D.C.? I didn't know that you had to nominate a band. I said, sure. You know, I mean, I come from a town of 300 people. Am I going to say no? So I said, sure, be happy to. I wrote a letter. 6 weeks later, got a letter back saying the Bowbells High School Band in Bowbells, North Dakota, is going to be invited to march and play in the Memorial Day Parade. Man, I called them. They were so unbelievably excited. You can't imagine. And they said, this means the world to our little town, Senator Dorgan. And so they said, could you come by and take a photograph of these students, the band, before they get on the bus to go to D.C. at some point? My staff said, yeah, you'll be in the northern part of the state on this date, on a Friday, 6:30 at night, and he could stop by that town. And they said, that's good. So 6:30 at night, I drive into this little town and to the school, and the parking lot's full. Everybody in town has come to see. We take a picture with the band. As I walked into the school, there were these parents and teachers who, as I walked in, said, Senator Dorgan, this is the most unbelievable thing that's happened to our little town. It's unbelievable that our marching band is going to march in the Memorial Day Parade. They knew that the Memorial Day Parade is the parade. It's the U.S. Army Marching Band, U.S. Navy Marching Band, U.S. Air Force Marching Band, the best college marching bands. They knew how important it was. They said, you know, Senator, this is such great news. This is the first year of our marching band here in Bowbells. I said, actually, no, I wasn't aware of that. Now that you mention it, should have asked more questions. And then I discovered that in order to get a 29-member marching band in a town of 300 people, you've got to go from the senior class to the 6th grade. And the biggest senior boy blew the tuba, and the smallest 6th grade girl played the piccolo, the flute. And then they marched and played 3 songs on the gymnasium floor. And then we took a picture. And you know, they weren't the best marching band I'd ever seen. It was their first year. Next time I saw them, they were marching down Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C. And interestingly, almost everybody knew what this was because they had these great marching bands. And in this marching band, there were 2 girls holding a banner, 2 high school girls at the front of their band. And it says Bowbells High School Marching Band, Bowbells, North Dakota. And people, as this band marched and played, people saw what that was. They stood up, gave this band rousing applause, because they knew this was the little band that could. This was a little band that had the audacity to decide, I want to ask to march on Constitution Avenue. I don't have to tell my senator it's my first year because he probably won't ask. But you know what? People understood what that was that day. And I was so proud of them. Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C. is not reserved just for a small high school marching band or even the Air Force marching band. It's reserved for all Americans to hold their banners, talking to their government. And the banner, it seems to me, for our industry, for renewable fuels, for a renewable fuel standard, for the kind of strengthening of our country, both in energy policy and national security. That banner, it seems to me, is a banner that we ought to continue to share with our country and the world on Constitution Avenue. Now, the President and a delegation of Congress is paying their respects in Saudi Arabia this week to the king who has passed away. And I support that. I think that's the right thing to do. But what I would really hope is that perhaps they'd make a stop on the way back from Saudi Arabia, the President and that delegation, and perhaps come and see what the message is here and pay some attention to the heartland and the issues of the heartland that deal especially with renewable fuels. It's important. This industry called renewable fuels, those who've risked their fortunes, risked their money, those who spend all their time building these plants and producing the renewable fuels, there is not some divine guidance which suggests this will always be successful. It just isn't. The federal government, our government, as a matter of national policy, has led us in this direction, and now we're at parade rest. And all of us need to answer the question for our country and for our government. Do we go forward and expand and grow? Or do we decide to listen to the discordant voices of the oil industry and others who want us to continue to ride that Saudi Arabia roller coaster of international oil pricing? The answer ought to be pretty clear for the future of this country. I just want to say that when Senator Talent Johnson and I offered the renewable fuels mandate, we didn't know what would come of that, but I can't be more impressed than I am when I go to North Dakota or now to Iowa and see you. As I said before, very often people in small towns with big ideas who decide you can build a plant, you can produce made in America ethanol and made in America biodiesel, and you can be part of strengthening this country. I can't be more impressed at seeing the effort and the ingenuity and the passion with which you've done that. This country owes you a great debt of gratitude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. I think this industry owes you a great deal of debt in terms of the work you've put into the RFS, and thank you very much. We have time for one or two questions. Let me start, maybe to get the ball rolling. What is, of all the issues that you raised during your talk, what's the single biggest concern you have for our industry?
Well, there are two. First of all, we need an answer out of the White House of strong support for an expanded renewable fuels mandate. That hasn't come yet, and we need to continue to push and push and push very hard to get it. Second, we have a dysfunctional Congress, as you know, and the Congress, regrettably, just can't make decisions on much of anything, and they have very loud voices on the edges, and that dysfunction makes it very difficult to get good public policy out of the Congress these days. Someone asked me when I left the Congress, and I left voluntarily, and it's hard to do. It's hard to leave. Some people can never leave, but I'd been there 30 years, and I wanted to do other things. I've finished my 4th book, and I'm a visiting professor at a college and doing consulting, a lot of things. But they asked me, what's it like leaving Congress and then now watching it from afar? And I told them of a 4-line poem that Ogden Nash had. He drinks because she scolds, he thinks. She scolds because he drinks. she thinks. And neither will admit what's really true. He's a drunk and she's a shrew. Now, I'm not suggesting that of my former colleagues. I'm just saying that each thinks the other's wrong, and neither will admit that they need to meet in the middle somewhere. So I think we've got a problem in Congress, discordant voices. Some would like to shut this down. And we have a White House that seems not to be embarrassed about missing deadlines over and over again. I hope both will fix themselves, but they're probably going to need our help. And please don't quote me on the Ogden Nash thing. He wrote that, I didn't. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Senator. Paul Gorman from North Mankato, Minnesota. Grew up in South Dakota. I've always admired what you have done. And I'm both inspired and discouraged by the two speakers here at Len, right before you, and by you. Both incredibly good speakers. Inspired by them and discouraged by the fact that I think too many of us are our worst enemies. In North Mankato, Minnesota, along Highway 169, Quick Trip spent $450,000 putting in a natural gas fueling station, but we don't have a single blender pump in a community of 50,000, with 2 colleges and a hub of agriculture for a 100-mile circle. The large regional farm co-ops, the Crystal Valleys, the WFSs, and all the FCs, I shouldn't say FCs, that's Iowa, but the southern Minnesota ones, I don't know of a blender pump in any of their organizations. I'm out doing farm balance sheets now, cash flows. Every cash flow I do, with these lower prices, farmers are going to lose about $100 an acre in real dollars this coming year at current prices. No matter how much we cut costs, try to negotiate rent down a little bit, we're looking at $100 an acre losses. And we need the ethanol industry to keep what will this do to small towns and to small town business? The renaissance we've had in the last, I'm sorry, I meant to ask a question. But what I want to point out here, I'm adding balance sheets. Okay, what have you traded? What machinery have you bought? Guys have bought new pickups. Everything, I live in town, everything I own is flex fuel. And I have farmers out here who aren't buying a flex fuel pickup, and if they have one, they're not using the 85. I stand out in 20 below zero weather with a flex fuel Focus. All last winter, I put in 8 gallons of gas and 4 gallons of E85, and then I have to go into holiday and I have to run my credit card twice. And we aren't doing the job we need to do. When you talk about the RFS, and we don't have a community out here that is writing enough letters, that seems concerned enough about their future. The last speaker, with all his military background, all his conservative credentials, talks about climate change, and I sit around talking to people who think climate change is a joke. I'm just so discouraged at some points, and yet inspired by the brilliance that you've shown here and the guy right before you, but I don't know what to do with it. I'm an investor in 2 ethanol plants because I started making ethanol and converting tractors 35 years ago. Okay.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Where do we go from here?
Let me ask you, I've said I was disappointed. I'm not discouraged. If I were discouraged, I wouldn't be on this stage.
Right.
We're going to win this battle. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever broken concrete with a sledgehammer?
A little. I've used an electric jackhammer more.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the easy way. My dad.
But I've poured concrete.
Yeah, my dad was very interested in having me adhere to a different standard, apparently, when I was a kid, because we had a 16-pound mallet that I could barely lift. And he said, you know, we have to break up our driveway, and you're the one, and I want to see you out there till it's done. And so it's awful. I don't know if any of you have done it. It's awful, getting a 16-pound mallet and hitting cement. Because what happens is when you hit that driveway, that cement driveway, you see no visible impact at all of what you've just done. And you do it once, twice, 10 times, 15 times, 20 times. But guess what? Every time you hit it, you're fracturing that you don't see underneath. And then, all of a sudden, the 25th hit with that mallet, the whole damn thing just comes apart. That's the way we have to go at the Congress and the President and public policy. And that's the way we have to convince our neighbors as well of the evidence and the passion of what we're doing here. You know, there's lots of reasons to be discouraged, but there's never a circumstance where you can quit fighting for the things that you know must happen for this country. And this is one of them. This is not just, it's easy to conjure up words and, you know, talk about energy security and national security and a lot of stuff. It's easy to do that, you know, to build word castles. This country is a better place when we've decided that we're going to empower people and incent people and encourage people to build plants on the prairies that produce ethanol and biodiesel and do it year after year after year. And if we do enough of it, and it'll make us less reliant on the Middle East and the Saudis and others, there's no question that that's what we should want for our kids and our grandkids. This is a fight that I'm not prepared to lose. This is a fight that we're going to win. We may be discouraged along the way, but what we're doing is important and right for the country. And you know something? The old guy that was interviewed by the press, he was 88 years old or something, and the press guy said, well, you've seen a lot of changes in your time, old-timer. He said, yeah, been against every one of them. We all know people like that. They're playing pinochle in the bar while somebody else is out paving the main street of the town. You know, we know that. But I just say this. We need to keep up this fight because we're going to win this fight. And one last point. I noticed in the paper yesterday, I was on the East Coast yesterday, and I noticed that Governor Branstad said that he's putting together an organization. So you got all these politicians coming through here, right, that want your vote? And he's going to see if he can run them through the eye of a needle that says, well, before we ask for your vote, let us tell you how strongly we support this future of biofuels. Good for your governor. That makes a lot of sense. And by the way, as long as I'm here, I'm thinking of running for president. Oh, no, I didn't mean that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Very much.
Thank you.